The King of Fighters is my favorite fighting game franchise, and I really wanted an excuse to talk about it long form. So I mixed my two passions, KOF and stupid little facts, and got this. This project originally started as a fact for every KOF character, but no, that didn't work. See, there are tiers to this sort of thing. Kyo, Iori, Terry, Kula, lots to work with. Duolon, Hein, Mui Mui, Mukai. Here's an example, okay? Shen Wu's fact was that he hated women. I found a fact for every character, then cut all the ones that sounded lame, and kept around 30 facts of actual quality. And then I spun a wheel. I got 20 more of these things in reserve, and there's stuff that I think is even more interesting than what made it into this one. But if I don't respect the wheel, then what do I have? It's spun! For me! Ralf Jones, the one-man World War and member of the elite Ikari Warriors mercenaries. Now, I've prided myself for years on my ability to always be biased. I don't let objectivity get in the way of me liking things. I own way too many Sonic games to have any credibility. So let that not stop me when I say that Ralf is my absolute favorite KOF character. From the outside, he really shouldn't be. His design is simple and far from remarkable. His moveset doesn't seem to have much on the surface, and it takes a few games before him and Clark become anything other than alternate costumes for each other. However, after dedicating enough time to him, I can't say anybody but Clark comes close to how much I enjoy playing as them. Ralf is a f***ing menace to society. A character who plays well as a beginner button masher with damage high enough to make up for the skill gap, and as a top tier, who has an option to deal with everything. When I grow up, I want to be just like KOF 98 Ralf Farsi. He may be just like Clark for the first two games, but by KOF 96, a personal favorite, he gets a much more fleshed out moveset with a lot of personality. And a game later, he would get the best special move in the series, Galactica Phantom. This is the most main character-coded move you'll ever see. A big punch that tough guys through everything, and instantly kills if it clashes with another super. Look at this, he's so cool! He's also a great showcase for how well SNK treats its teams that aren't the hero team, and gives them some story outside of a generic non-canon arcade mode ending. I won't say the distribution is fair, not while Art of Fighting exists, but Team Ikari Warriors always get something good in their endings. Ralf giving Leona his bandana at the end of 97, him and Clark tanking an Orochi Leona rampage to make sure she doesn't feel bad, being the military team made them way more important than most, down to even being the canonical winners of the 2003 tournament. The least important one. As for what I actually wanted to talk about with Ralf, though, it relates to the idea that KOF itself was built on. KOF 94 was built as a way to cross over the most popular fighters that SNK had at the time, Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting. But it wasn't just them. No, after a while, when the team format was decided on, they branched out to include characters from other popular games, the two biggest ones being Psycho Soldier and Ikari Warriors. We'll talk about Psycho Soldier some other time, but as for Ikari Warriors, it was a 1986 arcade run-and-gun game released by SNK that saw Ralf and Clark running shirtless through the jungle and shooting anything that moved. This was a top-grossing arcade cabinet in its release month in Japan, and a top 5 grossing arcade machine in 1986 after its American release. It got 2 additional sequels, dozens of ports, even a communist-flavored reskin in the form of Guevara, a run-and-gun game starring Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. This is the sort of stuff you learn when you do research where they don't expect you to. They don't have time to hide super communist bros. Despite being twins, Ralf actually has a 1-game lead on Clark, since Clark was indeed made for Ikari Warriors, but this wasn't Ralf's first game. Ralf would appear a year earlier in the predecessor to Ikari Warriors, Tank. While the pilot of the tank itself is never shown in-game, it was revealed that the person driving it was actually Colonel Ralf, who would then reappear in Ikari Warriors, miss out on Guevara for some reason, and then make his big fighting game debut in KOF 94. I was a little worried, since nowhere exactly cited a source for where this information came from, least of all the SNK wiki, which I barely trust to spell its own name, but luckily the Arcade Classics re-release confirmed it is Ralf inside of the tank. This would carry over into the spiritual successor for Ikari Warriors, Metal Slug, where Team Ikari Warriors has shown up ever since Metal Slug XX, even appearing as units in the spin-off Tactics game. They're just as much Metal Slug characters as they are KOF characters. However, this doesn't tell the full story. With the release of Tank in 1985, it predates the release of Art of Fighting, Fatal Fury, Psycho Soldier, and Ikari Warriors. That means that Ralf is the oldest character ever introduced into King of Fighters, beating his own partner by over a year. Ralf is KOF's version of Mr. Game & Watch. Can someone draw Ralf doing a Galactica Phantom and clashing with Game & Watch's Ninehammer? Igniz, the leader of Nests and the final boss of the second story arc. Igniz is a character that's super important to the story of KOF, being responsible for everything that happened between 99 and 2001, and being responsible for the creation of some really important characters. And yet, we still don't really know that much about him. He killed his own father to take over the Nest's cartel. He wanted to find the strongest human on Earth so he could kill them and secure his godhood. But beyond that, he suffers from the Nest Saga problem of most bosses being really flat. He makes up for it with a few different aspects, like being one of the most beautiful fighting game sprites you'll ever see. His flowing robes extending out into whips and spikes is a level of animation flexing you only get from Billy Khan, and visually, it makes him one of the most striking bosses in the entire series. He also gets a contender for the best theme in the series with Save the Universe from KOF 2002 Ultimate Match. In a series with the best music fighting games have to offer, this is among the best. He also has, maybe, the funniest line in the entire series. SNK gave us Dweebenheimer, Wubba Wubba, I'm in the pink today, boy, and Pinheaded Son of an Ice Cream Maker, and super self-serious Igniz slinking away after being beat and asking, is this the end of lovable Igniz? Might be the top of them all. This is all to soften the fact that Igniz is the fucking worst. Oh my god! SNK boss syndrome is a very real thing, and there are some who have it bad, real bad. Rugal, Geese, Genets, Magaki is the worst one, but I think Igniz might be a close second. The guy never ever stops. He's got every good move a character could have, and then he has the best version of it. Fireballs, DPs, reflectors, counters. If Igniz had a single thing he could do wrong, he might be beatable. Mixed with the infamously input-reading AI of the KOF games, and Igniz went from a roadblock to a cliff face. You don't beat Igniz, you find a way around him. So imagine how cool the guy who canonically beats him has to be. No, not K-Dash, though. I mean, look at him, he Shadow the Hedgehog made human, K-Dash is so fucking cool! No, there's only one guy with enough chutzpah to put Igniz down once and for all.
And his name is John Cena!
This is gonna take a minute to explain. KOF All-Stars, the King of Fighters mobile game that ran from July 2018 to October 2024. A 2D beat-em-up that used gacha mechanics to get you new characters from all across the franchise, and often different versions depending on which year they came out in. Unless you were one of the people who made it your gacha of choice, the only thing you'd ever hear about it was the crossovers it would get. In order from least to most absurd, you'd get Street Fighter, Tekken, Virtua Fighter, Dead or Alive, Soul Calibur, Guilty Gear, Seven Knights, Seven Deadly Sins, and Gintama. This only gets weirder when you see what order they were released in. Like, which collab do you think was the Street Fighter one? How about third from last? After Gintama, Seven Knights, and pre-Strive Guilty Gear. The collabs also introduced various versions of old characters in the crossovers style, like Low Poly Rugal in the Virtua Fighter style. It's weird and really hard to get over at first, but once you see how they're used, and remember it's just a mobile game, it's just kind of funny. I don't know who Elizabeth is, but I think they're the main character of Gintama now. There is one more collab though, and I kinda had to create some distance so it didn't make you think the rest were fake. This is the KOF WWE crossover. Wrestlers from the WWE were added into All-Stars in 2019, part of a relationship that's been going on ever since. SNK and WWE met through their mutual friend, the Saudi government, and ever since have been thick as thieves. Among the wrestlers included were The Rock, calling Orochi a thong-wearing fatty, Kofi, Becky, and Seth, just so you knew down to the fucking second when this collab was done, and of course, John Cena. A few of the wrestlers would get crossover stories with the KOF characters, like the Rock example I gave, and Big Match John had to take on Igniz. There's a real game where SNK Boss Syndrome's poster child fights the Doctor of Thugonomics, and you can't play it! John Cena survived getting stabbed by Jesus. This was a walk in the park for him. After taking down Igniz, he attempts to blow up his space station, except John planned for that and sent Shingo to disable it. Igniz, dejected, defeated, and with no immediate way to kill himself, decided to listen to John Cena when he said he will make him a god, a power that you get after being a 17-time world champion. He helps Igniz turn his cartel into a pharmaceutical company that has him heralded as a benevolent god for wiping out childhood chronic illnesses. This is the actual ending to John Cena's story in KOF All-Stars, taking the toughest SNK boss and turning him into a good guy, through hustle, loyalty, and respect. Now that Igniz is back after Verse died, I really hope they follow up on this. I want to see Igniz lead the C Nation now that John is retired. Vice, cannibalistic Hakeshu enforcer, and Iori's mom. Her and Mature adopted him behind his back. He's real bent out of shape about it. Vice was introduced as a fighter in KOF 96 with the game's wave of new combatants, but just like her teammate Mature, she actually appeared a game earlier as Rugal's assistant. Vice was assigned to keep an eye on Iori by Gentsai, and ends up getting killed by him in a Riot of the Blood fit at the end of her very first appearance. From there, she was saved for the Dream Match games to excuse her death, until KOF 13, where f*** it, they're just ghosts. This was before the Verse Saga made character resurrections a thing, so they could only excuse these two returning by saying they were ghosts. Everybody who was still dead just didn't want it bad enough. For more about Vice herself, I like her a lot. Someone who I really grew to appreciate after playing as her for a while. She's overflowing with personality, being totally bloodlusted and throwing people all around the screen. She's got a lot of bites, that's personality. This is not a thing her and Mature share. Mature is almost a normal person, and Vice is like a rabid animal they fit into a skirt. This fits her perfectly as one of the most atypical grapplers you'll ever see. Instead of being all about landing big grabs after hard reads, tanking damage, and struggling against fireballs, Vice creates her own openings by using moves that force the opponent into unsafe situations, or simply forcing them into a grab situation with her shoulder barge into jumping powerbomb. She causes a hard knockdown on pretty much everything she does, and also struggles with fireballs. Why'd you keep that one? If you want to play a grappler who bucks a lot of trends that you'd find in a typical grappler, even ones in the same game, Vice is your girl. She also stands out because, off the top of my head, I can't actually name any other grappler characters who are straight up bad guys. Most other grappler characters are really nice people. Zangief, King, Potemkin, Ladiva, even KOF's own Daimon, Tizok, Clark, all nice guys. That's because you can't get mad at a combo grab when you know he donates to orphanages. Vice, meanwhile, is completely deranged and works for one of the most evil organizations in the entire series. She has no redeeming features, she has no redemption. She's a bad person who gets killed. Well, maybe no redeeming features is a bit of a harsh statement, because there is something to like about Vice as a person. Her main hobby. What does Vice do when she's not killing and eating people? Even though the Hekeshu is a group of psychotic murderers who want to kill everybody they meet, they do still find some time to indulge in their hobbies. Genets spends his time between harassing arcades with tornadoes doing rock climbing. Mature enjoys tinkering with machinery, whatever the hell that means, and Shermie likes breeding hamsters. It makes them all feel so much more alive when, even though they're all evil, they do have some really simple hobbies. And Vice's vice is American comic books. Ever since her debut in KOF 96, the one thing that's remained constant about Vice is that she's a really big fan of comic books. Her most prized possession is a comic book signed by American comics creator Dan Brereton. They could have said Stan Lee, they could have said Jack Kirby, Rob Liefeld, Mark Miller, Alan Moore, but they named, specifically, Nocturnal's creator and the guy who drew the album art of Hellbilly Deluxe, Dan Brereton. Vice says, fuck Marvel, fuck DC, I'm indie comics till I die. She probably has a favorite Ninja Turtle, and it's definitely Raph. This comics obsession continues in some official art done by series artist and horny person Falcoon. When drawing the series' entire roster, his drawing of Vice was her just leaving a comic convention, with a bag featuring pins of Spider-Man and the Avengers on a bag of art prints she just bought. This all implies some fantastic lore about Vice, like her walking around a convention hall just fantasizing about killing everybody and waiting 2 hours in a line to meet Peter Laird. This was even referenced in the KOF 15 interview done for Vice, where she talks about how she went to a comics convention once and left because it was too crowded. In the same interview, she even talks about her favorite comics, which she calls the funny animal ones with dark overtones. Above her fireplace is a framed copy of the Garfield comic where he thinks he dies, right next to the one of John drinking dog spunk. Maybe though she's actually talking about a good comic and not Garfield. See, I cleverly censored a detail about the Falcoon art. She actually had a sticky note over her shirt, because the design underneath is SpongeBob. There is official confirmation that Vice's favorite cartoon character is SpongeBob SquarePants. You will get triple powerbombed to hell, Vice will start eating your arm, and as you drift off to die, the last thing you'll hear is her singing Goofy Goober Rock. There is nothing else like this. The Spider-Man and Avengers references on the same artwork are easily missable. Less so is the giant picture of SpongeBob on her chest. Vice being a comic snob and SpongeBob fan are my favorite KOF jokes. And the fact I haven't seen her dressed up as SpongeBob yet is tragic. And I don't mean sexy SpongeBob, I mean like big, bulky mascot costume you'd see at Universal. Shin Gentsai, the master of the drunken fist and the least popular member of Team Psycho Soldier. I'm gonna play a deadly game here and make a definitive statement. Nobody likes Chin. He's the worst character on Team Psycho Soldier, and the other two podiums are empty. Even one-and-done teammates like Momoko and Malin have more fans than Chin does. Where Sai Kenso is just unpopular, a much larger group actively dislikes or flat out hates Chin. Chin falls into the worst archetype a fighting game character can. Annoying to play against while not being very good themselves. Chin's defining gameplay style is all about making your hitbox as small as possible with crouches and slides, long pokes with his bottle, and weird pseudo stances. Along with a naturally small frame, this makes fighting Chin best described as annoying. You're gonna feel frustrated fighting against him because that's the point. His whole playstyle is not getting hit and hitting at annoying times. That annoying playstyle is capped off when you realize beating him isn't actually that hard. Despite having the makings of a good character that could cause a lot of trouble, Chin's not very good at any of the things I described him as being notable for. He's carried mostly by people who made the insane choice to main him, or the AI which knows what you were going to do when you were still over at the Darkstalkers cabinet. All of these elements come together to make a character who has only ever skulked around mid-tier on his best day. Routinely, Chin is one of the worst characters in any game he's in, with his lone bright spot being KOF 13, where he's fine. Although, man, I gotta admit, he did get a complete rework in KOF 14. Literally scrapping everything about his old playstyle and giving him a new resource system with drinks that up his damage. And it's a lot better. Chin in KOF 14 is a lot of fun to play as when you're drunkenly waddling away to get wasted and then deal half their health with a single super. The SNK fighting game devs were struck with divine providence when they looked up to the heavens and asked, "How do we make Chin good?" And God whispered back down, "Just steal Shun Di from Virtua Fighter." Design and plot-wise though, Chin is not getting bailed out. A drunken old man on a team with a pop star and her best friend make for a really lame duck entry, who doesn't get phased out until KOF 2002. But don't worry, he's back in time for Ultimate Match, fucking up the Masters team because Saisyu couldn't be bothered. Well, Athena gets to be popular, and Kenso gets the Dragon Power storyline with Bao, that not even SNK cared about for more than 2 games, Chin has never done anything memorable or important in the plot of KOF, or for Team Psycho Soldier. He's just the third character. That really only leaves me with one thing to talk about, but in all fairness, it does make for a really interesting fact. 10-0 matchups in fighting games are extremely rare. And for those who don't know, a 10-0 matchup refers to a matchup between characters where across 10 matches, one character wins all 10 and the other character wins 0. Some matchups can feel unwinnable, maybe an 8-2 or a 9-1, but a true 10-0 matchup means that picking one character basically shuts off another one entirely because it's simply too overwhelming. Another perfect example of a 10-0 matchup is General Zod versus Lex Luthor from the first Injustice. Lex literally can't do anything to stop Zod from spamming full-screen fireballs that build meter, which he can then use to set Luthor all the way back to neutral where he began. It's such a rare phenomenon, I can't even think of a third example from a serious fighting game. Don't laugh about calling Injustice a serious fighting game, you know what I mean. Aside from one with Chin on the receiving end of some truly heinous luck. In KOF 95, the Italy stage for Team Fatal Fury is set in the water in front of a small dock. A lot of 95 stages have quirks to them for flavor, like the AOF stage starting smaller before expanding out a bit. So for Italy, the fighters start on the dock before hopping into the water to begin the round. It's a very small detail, but you might notice that the fight begins when the first player touches ground. So in a case of a character like Mai, the fight starts a few frames before she touches ground. It's such a small window, though, that it doesn't come up. Except for Chin. See, Chin is tiny compared to the rest of the roster, so he takes significantly longer to touch ground after jumping off. This opens him up to an attack, but who would have the ability to attack so quickly? Well, how about the most popular character in the game? Iori Yagami has a Rekka-style move that allows him to move forward while attacking, whose second hit can loop with the first one over and over, meaning Chin is juggled without the ability to fight back and ended out with Iori's DP to deal extra damage. Chin versus Iori on the Italy stage exclusively is considered borderline unwinnable for the Chin player simply because Iori gets to start the round early and wail on him for free. His slower falling speed from the dock means he can't press any buttons until he hits ground, and by the time he does, he's closer to a corpse than a character. Now, is this practical? No, because all you have to do to play around it is not pick Chin as your first character, since only the first teammate jumps off the dock. If you pick Chin second or third, you won't ever have this problem. And the Italy stage isn't either Team Rival or Psycho Soldier's stage, so you're even less likely to run into it. The fact, though, that it does exist at all, and it's so dominant in this one specific matchup, makes it one of the funniest glitches in fighting games. The glitch was so popular, it was even immortalized in real life at SNK's Akihabara store in Japan, with a mural of Iori vs. Chin on the Italy stage from KOF 95. With Iori doing his Rekka. I like that Chin's fact is about him getting hit. Iori Yagami, last descendant of the Yasukani bloodline and eternal rival to the Kusanagis. Iori is, to many, SNK's crowning achievement, a character who pushes every boundary of what can be taken seriously. He's got cursed blood, legs tied together like a jackass, Toucan Sam hair, attacks by scratching you like a cat, his strongest move has him give up in the middle and slam his fists like a gorilla, his fire is purple for God's sakes. If everything didn't work out perfectly, he'd be the biggest loser in the series. I know this because Capcom tried making this character and they fucked it up! But you know what? They did it! Iori Yagami is the coolest guy ever. Everything about him comes together to make a character that radiates cool. His design? Striking, iconic, and unlike any other character. Not just in SNK, but anywhere else. His moves? Unique and interesting. Taking the bones of the standard SNK protagonist and changing them up with moves of his own, like his Rekka string and his jumping back B, that defined what a good cross-up move is like. His fighting style looks cool, but at the same time is simple enough that new players won't get turned off. Like Ralf or Kyo, you can do pretty big damage easily with Iori, and he's pretty good at pretty much everything. If you choose to learn Iori as your first character, chances are pretty high you're gonna do well. He's got one of the coolest voices in the series thanks to Kunihiko Yasui, who voiced Iori all the way up to KOF 14, where the role got taken over by Takanori Hoshino. As for music, he's got Stormy Saxophone. Stormy Saxophone is one of the greatest fighting game songs ever composed and one of the best songs ever put into a video game. The reason we only have 5 Stormy Saxophones is because they're terrified about what will happen if they make a bad one. Save for the Nest saga, he's always got a big part to play in every storyline. Trying to kill Kyo, helping him, losing his power, grappling with the Riot of the Blood, there's never a time where Iori doesn't feel important. That made deciding what exactly to talk about with him hard. There's probably enough about Iori that we could have filled this entire discussion with just Iori facts. No need to pick the other 9. I decided to focus on 2 in particular, though. One about the character, and another about his reception. Iori Yagami looks cool. Iori Yagami also looks like a fucking idiot. These are not mutually exclusive stances. I think it's fair to say that even though it does come together to be a cool design, Iori still does have features that, objectively, look ridiculous. The legs tied together, shirt so long that if he tucked it into his pants they would come out the legs, underbust jacket to reveal his bodacious tatas. Please tell me the lights were off when he dressed himself. But again, it does come together, and it's greater than the sum of its parts. You don't have Masahiro Sakurai being personally disappointed he couldn't put you into Smash and calling your designer a genius with a lame outfit. Part of what makes it look so good is that it's actually meant to go together, as in his outfit is based on real fashion. The outfit specifically takes pieces from a line done by famed British fashion designers Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren, famous for bringing in a punk element to their fashion that helped to bring the movement into mainstream British culture. The particular pieces that come from Vivienne and Malcolm's work include the velvet underbust jacket from 1988 and the bondage pants from the late 70s, mixed with an oversized World's End blouse and double monk strap shoes. You too can dress like this for a scant, just buy the cosplay on eBay. Now as for the second fact... Okay, so for this one we're gonna need to explain some stuff first, namely the manga DG Charat from author Koge Donbo. Originally created as a way to advertise a hobby store in Japan called Gamers, DG Charat eventually evolved into a series of mangas, animes, video games, and trading cards that have eclipsed the popularity of the store it was meant to promote. The story of DG Charat immediately crosses over with KOF, since the series' first appearance in gamer magazines was alongside an ad for KOF 98. This relationship lasts to this very day, as the debut of the new DG Charat OVA and VTuber model included a poster in her room of the recently released KOF 15. And as for Iori, Dejiko, the main character, lists Iori as their favorite character. That's cute. So why are we still here? See, it doesn't end with that. And now we have to explain that Iori and Kyo hate each other with a burning passion. They're at each other's throats whenever they see each other, and anytime they're working together requires either the pure-heartedness of Shingo or the doting attention of Chizuru, for the two to not kill each other. Naturally, this means people want them to have sex. Kyo x Iori might be the most popular ship in the entire series. The two rivals have gotten together in countless doujinshi and, let's say, porn, because they're just so handsome. How this all ties back in is because Dejiko is a Kyo x Iori shipper, as was confirmed in a comic strip of her attending a convention and buying Kyo and Iori doujinshis. SNK knows how much people want to see these two make out sloppy style, and they will wield it against you like a battle axe. Clark Still, member of the Ikari Warriors and owner of the best sunglasses in the series. Well, not like I can really hide this one. Clark, as the other main member of Team Ikari Warriors, is a big favorite of mine, appearing in just as many games as Ralf, which is to say, every single one. Clark is your archetypal grappler. Yeah, you could go for Gatling Attack or Vulcan Punch, but is there a situation a super Argentine backbreaker can't solve? If you're looking at the most hated KOF characters, chances are people are going to name Clark as one of the most hated. Because, as the archetypal grappler, he bears the brunt of all the abuse that grappler mains get. Unfortunately, I can't hear him over the roar of the crowd! Instead of giving him boring CQC or a more standard military martial art, Clark's moveset is totally based around wrestling moves that make him so much more fun to play as. It started out with just the backbreaker, which he shared with Ralf, but once his moveset got more fleshed out, they thought, he could probably do a powerbomb. Fast forward to KOF 15, and he's got rolling death cradles and DDTs. The guy's completely lost it. Tossing the opponent up and down like a newborn, and posing between catches, or running back and forth from one side of the screen to the other, slamming the God of Evil while posing to a crowd that isn't there, is more than enough to make Clark one of my favorites. He also gets to be the straight man to Ralf, which along with how well their friendship is done, makes them one of the best duos in the series. Although he is a straight man, that doesn't mean he's no fun, because matching him and Ralf against each other in KOF 97 gives you this. If you're a fan of Super Sentai, you'd recognize the poses they're striking as being straight out of Chojin Sentai Jetman. Ralph strikes Red Hawk's pose, while Clark strikes Black Condors, down to using the same transformation phrase, cross-changer. If you're wondering why he didn't go for blue, seeing as that's Clark's color, it's because Jetman's Blue Swallow was a girl. This is only the beginning though, since there are tons of Sentai references in not just Clark, but all of Team Ikari Warriors' movesets. Ralph, for starters, has the Ralph Kick, a pretty obvious homage to the Rider Kick. You can even narrow it down to specifically Kamen Rider Black RX's RX Kick, thanks to Ralph touching the ground before jumping and then rotating in the air. Black RX must have been a really popular series within SNK because there's another reference to it in Leona's moveset, with her Rebel Spark being a one-for-one copy of the Revol Clash used by RX. For non-Kamen Rider references, you also have her intro costume, which is taken from Jetman, as well as her V-Slasher being lifted from Voltes 5. But this is about Clark, and while he's got his Sentai influences, just look at this alternate costume from KOF All-Stars, there's another series that he takes inspiration from. I tricked you all. I played you like a seal plays the xylophone. I lured you in with Kamen Rider. Now it's time for Kinnikuman! You didn't think they'd really give him all these wrestling moves and somehow avoid a Kinnikuman reference, did ya? Well, lucky for me, they went completely overboard with the Kinnikuman references in both his and a few other characters' moves. The most obvious is with Clark's signature backbreaker, being lifted from Robin Mask's favorite move, the Tower Bridge. You could say that I'm pulling this out of nowhere, since the backbreaker is a common wrestling move, but you'll look stupid in a minute, trust me. As soon as KOF 96, the influence becomes a lot more blatant with the brand new move, the Clark Spark. After the Ultra Argentine backbreaker, Clark will meet his opponent in the air to deliver a muscle spark, the signature move of the Kinniku clan, used by Suguru in the Scramble for the Throne, Perfect Origin, and Omega Centauri arcs.
But I think you'll find the lack of clasping the arms as well as the finishing reverse Romero special make this closer to an Ataru muscle spark used by Kinnikuman Soldier.
This is how I see myself. Sticking with Kinnikuman Soldier and KOF 96, Clark got a brand new anti-air grab called the Napalm Stretch that he'd keep up through KOF 11. This move is ripped straight out of Soldier's moveset. In 2002 Ultimate Match, Clark's insane Rolling Sphere special move includes some of the moves I've mentioned before, as well as ending out with a calf branding, Terryman's special move. KOF 11 swaps out the Napalm Stretch and instead modifies the ending to the Ultra Argentine backbreaker, going from a Clark Spark to a Clark Special, taken from Robin Mask's signature move during the Scramble for the Throne arc, the Robin Special. In KOF 14, it would be changed again, sticking with Robin Mask, as instead it was replaced with a reverse Tower Bridge, used in the Golden Mask arc. The ultimate Clark Buster from the same game would shift down a generation to Robin Mask's son, Kevin Mask, who uses the Big Ben Bash as his finisher. Clark adopts this into his own move, as well as throwing in a leg lock to make it his own. I will make you watch Kinnikuman one way or the goddamn other.
K49 はまだ子供だからにゃ。
Angel, former Nests enforcer and best friend to Persona non grata K49. Despite being a late addition to the series in KOF 2001, Angel has become one of the mainstays of the series. A peppy and non-serious Mexican wrestler who also just happens to have on as few clothes as she can while still getting into the TGI Fridays. Angel, from an outsider's perspective, looks like a really easy character to like. That makes it all the funnier that SNK really doesn't want you to like Angel. Don't get me wrong, the design probably kept the lights on at SNK for a few more years because she has big boobs. Biggest in the series, in fact. Discounting Rugal. But if you start to dive into her, you find out she's kinda horrible. Her backstory sees her joining Nests and getting augmentations to enhance her strength. where she got the role of corralling experiments, both loyal and rogue. This led to her getting a relationship with Nest Experiments' Kula Diamond and Sylvie Pala Pala that can best be described as zoo attendant. They try to make it as funny as it can be in SNK heroines, but the two went through hell at Nests, and on Hell loves bringing up the fact that she had a part in it. She also mocks Kula for the time she attempted to kill Kula's handler Foxy, and even if she might act cute, she's really an irredeemable bastard. Give her a Christmas sweater and some sensible slacks and she's losing at least half of her fanbase. The other half that are staying for the gameplay are only doing so they don't take a loss on investment. Angel is infamous in KOF for being, bar none, the hardest character to play. This is thanks to what's called the Unchained system. What this is subsets upon subsets upon subsets, where certain specials can be cancelled into other specials, which then are cancelled into even more specials. Mixing and matching the starters, fillers, and finishers based on what you need in the moment, what would benefit you, and what you want to do after it makes Angel a nightmare to play. You have the answer to every situation, and fireballs are practically a non-issue, but a character this free-flowing takes way more time to learn, and undivided attention to execute properly. I think there's a real beauty in how you can't play Angel one-handed. However, gameplay and story have to rank second and third when it comes to interesting details about Angel. There's something much deeper than either of those that eclipses both of them in terms of intrigue, and it's how she was made. The story starts with Ivoga, a Mexican game company started in 2000, which developed Rage of the Dragons for the Neo Geo arcade machines. The connection was possible due to SNK's deep ties to the Mexican territory, thanks to the availability of Neo Geo Red arcade cabinets in the region. If you know anything about KOF, it's probably that Mexico is their home away from home. Ivoga was a team made up of people who grew up playing SNK fighting games, many of whom worked with SNK previously as testers, which made the development deal possible. This was a team that was eager to work with the company and got the chance to meet the developers responsible for the games that inspired them. On a trip to Japan to discuss publishing Rage of the Dragons, they would end up meeting people like Eikichi Kawasaki, the man who founded SNK, as well as the team currently hard at work on KOF 2001. At this time, SNK was owned by Eolith after going bankrupt. They were probably getting turned into pachinko machines soon. People were on edge. When Ivoga mentioned what big KOF fans they were, though, the two teams sparked up friendly conversation and got to playing some games of KOF 98 on original hardware. This was a lovely crossover of cultures. Two groups formed out of their love of making games. They can't speak the same language, they can't understand each other, but through KOF, they're able to learn everything about each other. It's a beautiful showcase of what makes fighting games so perfect as a genre. And then SNK started losing. Yeah, coming from Mexico means you have a genetic predisposition to be good at KOF. Neo Geo arcade cabinets were mini hyperbolic time chambers where they figured out cold fusion with Takuma. SNK was getting tilted, and so made a wager. Our three best players, your three best players. KOF 98. Put up or shut up. If Ivoga wins, we'll let you design a character and put him into KOF 2001. We win, and we get to put a character of ours into Rage of the Dragons. And, I don't know, maybe we get $5,000 too, some non-perishable goods, maybe a couple coupons. Do it, pussy. Ivoga agreed to the terms, and the match had all the competition of a shotgun versus a butterfly. Ivoga swept Team SNK, and from there won the bet. Since they're SNK fans, their idea for a new character was a Mexican pro wrestler with big boobies, a leather jacket, chaps, and the people's elbow, named after Ivoga's head, Angel Torres. Nowadays, you gotta fund a Kickstarter to get a character in your favorite games. Back then, you just had to make the devs feel small. Krizalid, the first K- clone and the final boss of KOF 99. Krizalid was our first taste of what the Nest Saga was going to be like, and he's a much different flavor compared to what came before. Instead of the century-spanning magical storyline of the Orochi Saga, the Nest Saga drops us into the middle of a story all about cloning, space lasers, tech suits, and espionage. After the events of KOF 97, Kyo and Iori are left incapacitated, with Kyo's unconscious body swiped by Nest, a global cartel who used his DNA to create clones in order to take over the world. The Nest Saga's darker story is seen in everything, from the more grounded and less crowded stages to the designs of our main characters. K-Dash is, as we said, fucking badass, but his design is a huge departure from the schoolboy with attitude that Kyo was. Speaking of Kyo, he's gone from a cocky hothead to a jaded, angry loner who acts as a free agent up until the very end of the arc. Nowhere is the Nest Saga's more grounded and gritty story evident than with Krizalid. Krizalid is initially pitched as the first clone of Kyo ever made, and the original that the clone K-Dash was based on. Only in K-Dash's ending do we learn that it's the reverse. K-Dash is the original, and Krizalid is the clone. He spends his last few minutes alive, betrayed by the organization that made him, betrayed by the sister he thought he had, and realizing his entire life was a lie before getting crushed by falling rubble. He'd return in the saga's climax, only more assured in his status as the original K-Dash, to the point of claiming Whip as his own sister. He eventually accepts his role as a clone and lets Whip kill him so she can escape. As far as characters go, Krizalid is one of the most human SNK bosses. And while he's still a seething pain to fight, I don't hate him more than the average SNK boss. I actually like a lot about him, like his design. I don't know why they make him take off the jacket. The jacket's the whole design. Naked, take it or leave it. With jacket, awesome. His theme, Dear Falling Angel, is one of the best boss tracks in KOF. The roughest field to be in, since you're up against Kachaku and Trashhead, but this is more than good enough. I would really like to see a return for Krizalid now that he's back following KOF 14. I think a massively toned back, amnesiac Krizalid, found by Cronin and Angel, would make for a killer team former Nests, once Kula goes back to join up with K-Dash and Maxima. But where would that leave Whip? I don't know, back to hell where she came from! The explanation for Krizalid's design and the entire vibe of the Nest Saga can actually be traced back to a game that had nothing to do with KOF or even SNK, The Fallen Angels. This was a fighting game by the company Saikyo, released back in 1998. A dystopian fighting game following an earthquake that rendered a city a hotbed for crime and drug trade. Disconnected from the outside world and struggling to stay alive, now hosting a fighting tournament. This is a lot like the plot of the Rumblefish. Doesn't matter any, I just wanted to mention the Rumblefish. The game was beautifully animated, with fluid sprites evocative of the art style of Art of Fighting 3, and a style that nothing short of Groove on Fight could have matched. It was dark, gritty, and nothing like the brighter games that surrounded it, like Street Fighter 3 Second Impact or Marvel vs. Capcom. Another thing it doesn't share with a lot of other games from its era, though, was success, since Saikyo didn't have enough capital to continue development and had to rush out an unfinished version. After the game sold a big 300 copies, its various developers scattered into the industry, with our subject being the character designer Stylios. Stylios was the one who gave the game its goth punk style that made it stand out so much, and he would land a job at SNK to do the designs for the new characters of the Nest Saga. This would see some similarities crop up between his Fallen Angel designs and his KOF designs, like with K-Dash and Haji, who could have just been an alt for K-Dash. I'm pretty sure he was. Harry is a super soldier with cyborg enhancements and the ability to fire rockets. Maxima, see previous description, but Canadian. KOF 99 was massively influenced by Stylios and Fallen Angels, and that's especially seen in Krizalid. Not only does his current design look a lot more like something out of Fallen Angels, there's another character who shares big design elements with him from the original game. And that character's name was Cool. Little on the nose. Cool's design featured two big elements present across both Krizalid designs. those being the belts along his arms and legs, present in the final version of Krizalid, with the fur around his collar being in the first form. In fact, you probably already caught that Krizalid's theme being Dear Falling Angel was a reference to the fallen angels. And would you guess this isn't even the end of the references to fallen angels in KOF? But that's for a different character. Banderas Hattori, professional Brazilian ninja, and weeaboo. Banderas was a part of the massive group of new characters introduced in KOF 14, the largest KOF roster to that point, with the most newcomers the series had seen since KOF 94. The first one. Everybody was a newcomer back then. Alongside additions like Luong and Hein, Banderas is a part of one of two teams made up entirely of brand new fighters, along with Team Official Invite. He's a part of Team South America with Nelson and Zarina, a self-taught ninja with an obsession with everything Japanese. He isn't quite like Jetstream Sam or Sean from Street Fighter though, half Japanese, half Brazilian. No, when he was younger, he got a book about Japan from a foreigner on vacation and fell in love with the country. Banderas has never been to Japan and doesn't actually know that much about it, since in his team's ending, he's expecting Japan to be in the feudal period where he can find ninjas every 20 feet. Well, first off, you wouldn't find them, they're hidden, but also, with Mai, Andy, Eiji, and Lin, there is still a very active ninja population in Japan, so he's on the right track. Gameplay-wise, I think Banderas does a pretty good job finding a new take on the ninja archetype that KOF is, let's say, familiar with. He's very hit and run with a combination of teleports, leaping attacks, and slides that let him choose his range easily, as well as options to deal some decent damage in the form of a charge command grab and some strong utility with an off-the-ground special. His damage, unfortunately, keeps him from making good on all his potential, but I think he's a good addition. Same that I feel about the rest of Team South America, really. They're fine. Wouldn't be too upset to see him come back, but I definitely have characters I want to see come back first. And they might not have hit as well as they were supposed to with the very market they were meant to cater to. So a mission statement with the teams in KOF 14 was to represent parts of the world that previous KOFs hadn't really hit. That's how we got the introduction of Team China for the first time since Team Psycho Soldier, with them even being the main characters. Southtown got more representation with Geese's team, Mexico got a dedicated team for the very first time, they even represented the country of Pachinko, which nobody wanted. Team South America was meant to give exposure to, you guessed it, South America, and given the variety of designs, fighting styles, and the fact it was the first all-black team in KOF, it worked pretty well. But this is where a lack of research makes SNK look bad. It was good to represent South America, but they didn't do a very good job of it. Team leader Nelson hails from Brazil. Okay, it's the largest country in South America, only one that most people can point to on a map. Makes sense. Banderas, also from Brazil. Okay, well, there are other countries in South America besides Brazil. You got Paraguay, Peru, Venezuela, Ecuador, Guyana, Chile, Bolivia. Let's spread it out a bit, yeah? Well, luckily, final team member Zarina hails from Colombia. Why aren't we moving on? We only move on when it's done, so there's a catch. Zarina is from Colombia, and then moved to Brazil. I have never seen another KOF character with a bio like this, where it specifies their home country, and then which country they moved to. So this isn't Team South America, this is just Team Brazil. Every character on it hails from the same country, whether born there or moved there. This is Team USA, but every member is from Pennsylvania. Claiming your team represents a whole continent when only taking a small part of it is a really boring take. But it wasn't even the end of the representation troubles SNK had with Team South America. Banderas' teaser trailer alongside Mai seemed pretty standard, and does play on Banderas' over-enthusiasm over being a ninja, while showing off his moves. Except you'll notice that his name is spelled wrong. It uses this spelling of Banderas instead of the one used in-game. Well, it's actually not a misspelling. Rather, SNK used the Spanish spelling of Banderas, like Antonio Banderas. Banderas, how it's used in-game, is the Portuguese spelling. This caused a bit of a stir in the Brazilian KOF community, since Brazil is the only country in South America that doesn't predominantly speak Spanish. It was colonized by Portugal, and therefore primarily speaks Portuguese. Alright, so we've downsized from Team South America to Team Brazil and its friend Colombia, and now even that was shown in a bad light because of some sloppy research that didn't verify which version of the character's name was right. The whole thing is a confusing and disappointing mess that, once you learn, has you double-checking every time you spell the guy's name. Ryo Sakazaki, the invincible dragon of Kyokugenryu and the protagonist of the Art of Fighting series, SNK's second fighting franchise following Fatal Fury. Now, where Terry and Kyo are more grounded, everyman protagonists with their real-world struggles and emotional baggage, Ryo is not that. I mean, you hear the name and you see the design, and you can't not cry foul and say, you just made Ryu again. That's not an allegation his creator would even deny, though. In fact, if you go by who created each character, the pair are brothers, both being created by Street Fighter creator Takashi Nishiyama. Ryo was always meant to be a parallel and homage to Ryu, so it wasn't so much an attempt to jack Capcom's style, more so send up to Nishiyama's previous work. That doesn't mean the two are even carbon copies. Although Ryo does share Ryu's stoicism and intense focus on fighting, where in Street Fighter that's treated as deathly serious training, in Art of Fighting, and especially in KOF, everybody rightly treats Ryo like he's kind of a weirdo for how intense he is all the time, to the point of being totally oblivious to stuff like King's crush on him. His role as a pseudo-comedy character in that regard suits him really well, and helps him stand out in a roster where the first game had 3 different main characters jockeying for attention. However, just because he's usually treated like a joke character doesn't mean Ryo doesn't get the respect he deserves. In KOF 14's manga adaptation, the new character Shune goes on a rampage with his mystical powers. And who's the one to put him in his place? Ryo. And of course, you can't laugh at him too hard, since without Ryo, you wouldn't have this. Yes, you can draw an extremely straight line from Ryo Sakazaki all the way up to Super Smash Bros. And it all started in Fatal Fury Special. The game was an expansion to the original Fatal Fury, adding in playable characters who had previously only been opponents in the game's arcade mode. And if you won with a high enough score, you'd get what's called a dream match. And out of nowhere would hop in Art of Fighting's Ryo Sakazaki in a Fatal Fury game. This would be one of the very first instances of a fighting game guest character, only beaten out by Smash Bros. Top tier, Karnov. The internal reception to crossing over their 2 biggest fighting games was super positive at SNK, and they decided to expand it out even more and include more characters from each franchise, making it a full-on crossover fighter. Except, why stop at just the fighting games? Psycho Soldier is a pretty popular arcade game. We can probably sneak in Athena and Sai Kenso as characters. Ikari Warriors is pretty big too, so why not add them in as well? You know what, our sports games do pretty well, so why not throw them into the mix? You know what, we should add over 100 different in-between round games. Wait. This crossover would eventually turn into King of Fighters 94. And a year later, they decided it would be consumer-friendly to make the game function, and released KOF 95. This game would become a favorite of Kirby creator and director of the Smash series, Masahiro Sakurai, recounting as much in a column done for the Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu. He recalled a particular instance where after a nearly 50-game win streak, he found his next opponent was a lot slower than the others he had faced, only to realize that he was fighting a couple going on a date, and tried his hardest to throw the game without making it obvious. A curious note about the column, though, is how he describes his own gameplay, saying he hit them with a Zanretsuken, which is a signature move of Kyokugenryu Karate. Sakurai has made no secret of being a huge SNK fan, and the inspiration for a Nintendo crossover fighter coming from King of Fighters is really easy to see. Sakurai clearly never forgot his love for the franchise either, as when it was time to add Terry to Smash, his trailer wasn't just a regular reveal trailer. It embellished on SNK's entire history, showing off its whole catalog of characters and celebrating the company like no other developer got. And who was one of the characters chosen to get featured time in the reveal? Who was one of the characters chosen to be a Mii costume? Ryo Sakazaki, the guy responsible for the biggest celebration of video games ever put together. So that's his fact, right? So High Score Girl is a manga by Rensuke Oshikiri following Haruo Yaguchi and his romance with Akira Ono, the two bonding over their mutual love for arcade games and fighting games in particular. Whenever the pair find themselves in trouble and not knowing what to do, they'll often call on the advice of fighting game characters to try to ask them what to do, to which the fighting game characters will give them advice. One of Haruo's most frequent advisors is Ryo from The Art of Fighting, who no matter the situation will advise him to use the Hao Shokoken, Ryo's massive fireball special move. This is a reference to a very old meme based around Ryo from the first Art of Fighting, where he thinks to himself that the only way to stop an armored opponent is to use the Hao Shokoken. This evolved into his solution to every problem being to use the Hao Shokoken. This would have been included in High Score Girl's anime adaptation, if not for SNK suing Square Enix, the publishers of the manga, as they never actually asked if they could use SNK characters before publishing the book. This was supposed to be about the Smash thing, but once I found out about this, I couldn't not include it.